Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Better Mind Center's YouTube channel. And for those of you that are new here, the Better Mind Center is a group of mind-body oriented therapists and coaches helping clients recover from chronic pain, anxiety, and depression. And we are so excited to be with you here on our Troubleshooting Your Technique series. In this series, we're going to dive into the traditional mind-body recovery tools. We'll share new perspectives and techniques for you to try during your recovery journey. For intros, I'm Alyssa.
And I'm Bri.
And today we are going to be talking about a topic that I could talk about forever and ever and ever, visualization. So I know that visualization feels so mystical and abstract, and we're going to get into that a little bit, but more so, we're going to get into the science behind visualization and how it can actually help your chronic pain recovery. But to start, Bri, I'm curious because I know we've kind of touched on this in the past, but what do you think of when you think of visualization and how do you use it?
So I love to use visualization, and what I think of or how I introduce it is usually kind of like a version of imagining. And so I'm really excited to do this because part of the big part when I do bring this up with clients is they want to know why, right? Of course. Fair question.
Yeah.
Why
Why are
would
you
I do this?
constantly
Why
imagining
would this work? Why do I want to put effort into this? So really, when I think of visualizing, I think of giving yourself a different avenue,
Mhm.
really, because in the chronic symptom space, I think we spend a lot of time really on one lane of things, which is how bad we feel, right? How it's more of like a deficit lens where we're just experiencing things that are very real, right? It's not that we're not experiencing them and we're not trying to say that that's not happening. It's just kind of the way that I see it is like giving your brain an opportunity to experience something different,
Yeah.
um, which is important, right? Because we spend so much time on like one way of thinking about it. So to me, that's kind of what I see it. I see it as a break. And then, of course, there's the science behind it, which again is very exciting because we're going to be able to see what it could really do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And you're so right. If we spend so much time in our heads already about all of the what ifs that could happen, and those what ifs are surrounded about all of these negative outcomes with chronic pain, and we believe that those what ifs are going to become true because everything negative always comes true. I mean, that in and of itself is a form of visualization, right? Like that is a
yeah.
form of
Oh, totally.
visualization. So maybe why not shift
Totally.
our focus, if I'm understanding you correctly, to
Mhm.
okay, but what if we imagined a different outcome? And can we give your brain a break from all of the negative visualization by creating a positive pathway? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And I also see it. And when I tend to introduce this as if, of course, we know that with chronic symptoms, the physical aspect of things gets really difficult, right? So sometimes we're not ready to take a physical leap, which
Mm.
is fine, right? That's fine. And this kind of provides the opportunity to take a leap that's not physical, but is still like in the right direction.
Mhm.
So, which is great, right? Because that's what we want to happen. And the more that you visualize something else happening, the more familiar it becomes to you, the more you can trust that this can actually happen,
Right.
even before you're physically doing it, which is, I mean, pretty freaking amazing.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like building a sense of trust with your brain and the sense of normalcy with your brain before actually even doing the event. It reminds me
Yes.
of when we talked about one time how like what is it, like Olympic athletes practice visualization before going into an event and
Yeah.
how they talk about, can you actually talk about that for a second? Because I loved what you mentioned when we spoke about that last.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, of course, the Olympics are not right now. So I feel like if you were to ask any of them, they, yeah, I visualize this, right? I've done it a million times. I think one thing that sticks out to me, and I forget at what point I read this, it was in a book somewhere, but they're talking about Michael Phelps and
Mhm.
Michael Phelps, how he would go through his races in his mind, like over and over and over and over and
Yeah.
over,
Mhm.
with the outcome that he wanted, right? Which is, of course, winning. And so that by the time he actually got into the water,
Yeah.
his brain was so familiar about what to do, right?
Um,
How he's feeling, when this ends, how quick he's moving. And so everything was kind of laid out for it, right? Because of the visualization. So when we're visualizing, Toby Bryant actually says visualization too.
Okay.
So when we're visualizing, we're really creating a roadmap for what we want, right? So this is kind of another way of like attaining goals without necessarily it being like a goal that you write down. It's kind of just a more experiential version of like attaining goals, which yes, yeah.
Oh,
We like that. We love it.
yeah. Or I remember, and I unfortunately don't remember who the racers were, but someone beat like a 5 minute mile time at one point in the Olympics, and no one had done that before. And then after that person did, a bunch of other people did. And it's because they were able to see that one person succeeded in that feat.
Yeah.
They were able to visualize it for themselves and implement that visualization.
Yeah. Which is important because when you're in the space that you maybe your world's gotten smaller, your capabilities have gone down because of your symptoms. Like it's really hard to imagine that you can do the things that you used to do. And this is really that thing, right? That says like, no, we can at least imagine it, right? And then you're gonna talk about the science behind why that's even a thing. Why does imagining it actually benefit us, right?
Yeah, so let's jump into that. I am so excited. I tell this once I learned about this study, I started telling it to every single client that I work with, especially my clients with chronic pain, because if this study does not give you all of the answers you need in terms of, well, what's the science behind visualization and how it
Right.
works, I don't know
The
what will.
$1 million question.
Yes, exactly. Why am I doing this if there's no science behind it? Well, guess what? There actually is science behind it. So,
Yeah.
and one of my favorite studies, and hopefully I don't get some of the details wrong, but it's really the ending that matters. So, there was a group of researchers at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation in Ohio, and essentially they wanted to study the effects of visualization in bodybuilders. So, what they did is they had, I think it was either 3 or 4 groups of bodybuilders. They had one of the groups of, so they had the bodybuilders all take 2 weeks off from the gym. And then when they took the 2 weeks off from the gym, they had one group of the bodybuilders visualize themselves doing little like finger weightlifting exercises. Another group visualized doing like little elbow strength exercises. They had one group just continue with those same exercises, but with weights. And then they had another control group that also participated and partook in all of the measurements as the other groups. The finding is what's the most exciting because lo and behold, the group that practiced, all groups had muscle mass increase, of course, but the group that had, even though it was still the least percentage of muscle mass increase, it's still astounding that the group that visualized doing the little finger weights and doing the elbow weights, they had a 13.5% muscle mass increase just from visualizing these things. And if that doesn't prove the power and the science behind visualization, I do not know what will. So I'm curious.
Yeah.
Can you use that?
I mean, that's wild, right? To think that we can think our way to physical benefit. That's pretty crazy.
Isn't it crazy? And it also, I mean, it makes sense too. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine. No, go ahead.
Because Schubner, like Dr. Schubner in his book Unlearn Your Pain, he talks about what the brain is doing when we practice visualization. So essentially, our brain can't really tell the difference between fantasy and reality. The same parts of the brain light up either way. So that coupled with this study, I think that that's all the motivation that we need to give to clients to say, get back out there, start visualizing what you want to do with your life. And we'll talk about in a second how to break down to make it feel more practical. But isn't that just the power of the brain?
It's amazing, right? And I know I say that over and over and over again in my sessions, like our brain is so powerful. Our brain is so powerful. And of course, it's so helpful when there's science. That's going to back this. But I think like what is so also cool about this is visualization can look like a lot of things, right? Like I'm already hearing questions like, well, I can't visualize myself without pain, right? Like I can't see myself in a life where I don't have pain. And understanding that can be really difficult, right? Because again, you've been thinking over and over and over, and this has been your experience for however long it's been. But it doesn't have to just be that, right? You don't have to just visualize results. Like you can visualize emotions? Like, how are you going to feel as
Um,
you heal? How
yeah.
are your thoughts going to look as you heal? And when we were talking about this, I was telling you about how, like, I was studying for the LCSW test and how I kept visualizing what I was going to feel like once I passed it, right? So I didn't think about like answering every question right and just having confidence through that. I was like, okay, this is probably going to suck. But at the end of it,
It
I
does.
kept imagining like the relief that I was going to feel, like the weight lifting off of me, the thoughts that were going to go through my head. That was like, okay, I'm done, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is it. This is over. I don't have to think about this anymore. So if you're not in a space where you can think about, or it feels just too far removed from what you feel comfortable imagining, um, you don't have to go there yet, right? Like, this can be anything you want it to be, which is perfect because everything, it is not one size fits all, right? So it's important to find out what feels right for you. And you can start there and start with like picturing and visualizing the things that you want to do. And if that doesn't feel right for whatever reason, you can go to like, well, then how might this feel for me? Or what thoughts might I have? How might this just be different at all?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it could be
Yeah.
whatever you need it to be.
Totally. And I love that you really individualized it in that way. And also, it sounds like you're using visualization, at least with the LCSW example, you're using visualization also as a way to calm yourself down. Whereas
Yes.
I think of visualization, I think of it as a way to achieve my goals. So when you told me that and we talked about that difference when we took the exam, I was just like mind blown. I never even thought about using visualization as essentially a
Like, I'm
coping
going to
mechanism.
pass.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Right. Because it gives you a break from what you might just be thinking about over and over and over. Like, this is going to be hard. This is going to be hard. This is going to be hard, which
Yeah.
it is hard, but you can give yourself a break.
Totally.
You can imagine and visualize something that doesn't feel so activating.
Yeah. So with clients, then I'm curious for you in your sessions, when a client says visualization just doesn't work for me, like I cannot visualize doing a certain movement or activity or live a life without pain, that doesn't make sense to me and I can't do that. How would you guide a client through that experience to try and get them to visualize in a way that will actually help their healing journey?
Yeah. Yeah, I think having just a basic conversation and opening up because we might have not been there for a while, right? So that sounds like a very big question. Like, what would your life look like if you didn't have pain, right? A lot of people have trouble answering that, like,
Yeah.
rightfully so, because it's life changing, right?
Okay.
So I think where I start to just kind of fleshing out, okay, like, how would you feel though? Like,
Yeah.
are there any feelings like basic, like release? Would you feel release? Of course I would feel release, right? So we just kind of start making, even if you need to make a list and need to write it down first, like, it doesn't all have to be like a creative,
Right.
thing. Like, we can break this down to steps and okay, like, let me write down some things that I think I might feel, or let me write down some things that I think I might want to do. Um, some things that I would like to stop thinking. So what would that replacement be? Right? So maybe I just visualize myself not dreading, right? And we start there, not even just not doing the actual thing, but when you wake up, like, I imagine myself waking up and like, instead of thinking about my pain, I'm thinking about like, what am I going to eat right now?
Yes.
Like, just imagining, like, we can break it down, right? And that's like person by person, however, and you need to start. But which is also why I like this because you can just tailor and tailor and tailor and tailor until
Right.
it works.
Yeah. And you just keep going until it does work. And I
Right?
again love that you highlight with your clients, like, can you visualize how your response might be or how you might feel with the outcome, which feels much more, I think, grasp, like it's much more easy to grasp, like, oh, well, obviously, if I didn't have a life without chronic pain, I would feel happy. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's visualize that feeling
Good.
happy.
Yeah.
Like, awesome.
Think that.
Yeah. And when it's so different from how I approach visualizations with clients where I say like we can really chunk this up. And in fact, like a technique that we can use to get to movement essentially, whether that means being in the gym, running, yoga, just walking around, whatever you define as movement, we can use kind of a more official sciencey term for visualization, which is graded motor imagery, which is much more kind of like
Mm,
process
yeah.
oriented, whereas I feel like you're much more kind of goal oriented, like how will you feel? And I love that.
Yeah.
So it's a little different from how I approach visualization, in which I tell clients, okay, if it's too hard to visualize a life without chronic pain or a movement without pain, first thing is, can you recall and kind of reminisce about the past when you could do all these things without pain? Because
Yeah.
again, if it lights up the same parts of the brain as if you're actually experiencing it, and we can show your brain that the past is also familiar, aka having a life without chronic pain is familiar, we can bring that into the present moment too. If
Yeah.
clients can't do that because it feels too painful or too traumatic to bring up, or it makes them have a bunch of just emotional responses to imagining the past, I say, okay, well, then can we practice picking one activity? So I had a client once where he really wanted to get back into the gym. I said, okay. And he said, well, every time I even step into a gym, I immediately get my fear response and my pain immediately shoots up. And so where
Mhm.
we started was, instead of saying, okay, client, go and visualize yourself in the gym without pain doing all these things, I broke it, which I think you're also touching on, really chunking it down into, can you visualize just changing your response when you walk into the gym? So can you
Yeah.
visualize having an experience with the gym where you step in there and it's not fear inducing? It's actually just neutral, or maybe
Mhm.
excitement inducing. And can you, if you can't visualize the actual pain-free element of the experience, can you visualize having a different outcome? Which I think
Yeah.
is can be a really, really practical and tangible first step for a lot of clients too.
Yeah. I totally agree. It is a very practical place to start.
Yeah.
Even just like the neutral space, right?
Right.
Like, what if you feel like nothing? Like,
Right.
you want to go to the gym? What if you're just not even thinking about it?
And wouldn't that be
There's no
better?
thought.
Yeah. No thoughts are better than fear thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. And just I wanted to bring this up because you were talking about just how much we are thinking negatively.
Um,
Um, right, not on purpose, but
okay.
that happens, right? And this is a way where we don't have to think
Yeah.
but negatively.
So basically, what I'm understanding too is remaining flexible with the goals, remaining flexible with the process, and allowing yourself to just experiment with visualization and find how it fits for you.
Mm.
And that flexibility piece, I think, is so important, and something that you always, always reinforce, whether in our meetings together, or I notice you reinforce just as a life mantra, just flexibility, flexibility,
Yes.
which I love. So, in total, to recap, Bri, I'm curious if you wanted our viewers and clients to take away just one thing from this video, what would it be?
I think I really want to drive home the point that like this doesn't look like one thing.
Yeah.
So if you feel like I cannot visualize, I would really invite you to remember that this can be whatever you need it to be. So
Yeah.
be flexible, right? Like it doesn't have to be one thing. It doesn't have to look like one thing. It can look like whatever, wherever you're at. Like this can kind of meet you there. So not to get too maybe discouraged if you feel like thinking or visualizing a specific thing is not really working out for you,
Yeah.
that you can switch it up at any point to whatever feels better for you.
Sure. I love that. Yeah. If I had to take away anything from this video, the whole reason why I wanted to make this video was for all of our viewers and clients to know that study. That is the one.
Yes, we're very excited.
Remember it, learn it, love it, tell it to everybody you know, because that study is just so
Right?
powerful. So, again, the power of visualization. You can have a 13.5 muscle mass increase just from visualizing yourself doing this and this.
I'm
Please
gonna
take
think about working out a lot.
exactly. I can think about it and just hope I reach all my goals with that. And I actually know I will. With that, thank you so much for watching this video and for joining us. If you're looking for one-on-one support, or even would just like to stay connected with us, please reach us at bettermindcenter.com or on Instagram with better dot with dot Christy. Or of course, watch our videos on YouTube as we're uploading all the time. The links are also down below if you need them. And until next time, bye.
Okay.